Hey guys, tonight we drift back into a world of flickering torches and timbered beams, where the air smells faintly of damp straw and roasted barley. You step into a medieval brew house, and the warmth of the fire makes your cheeks glow. Wooden vats bubble gently, and the froth rising on the surface has the faint scent of yeast and herbs. Somewhere in the background, a brewer leans against a barrel, already tasting one sip too many, his eyelids heavy, his shoulders slouched. You probably won't survive this journey, at least not with your eyes open the whole way. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you want to play along, post your location and local time in the comments, so we can all picture this sleepy brew house together across the map. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trail your fingers along a sticky wooden counter, left glossy with spilled ale. The brewer's apprentice wipes half-heartedly with a rag that smells worse than it cleans. He yawns wide enough to swallow the candle flame, then ladles a foamy sample into a mug. You take a sip, surprised that it's warm and slightly sour. This is not the crisp lager of your modern grocery aisle. Medieval ale is heavy, unfiltered, alive with yeast that keeps on fermenting even as you drink. One mainstream fact to note: before clean water was common, ale was the everyday drink. Children sipped it, nobles ordered it by the cask, and workers gulped it before trudging into the fields. It wasn't necessarily stronger than a soda today, but after enough cups, you start to lean like the brewer against his barrel, half in work, half in dream. The air grows thicker, tinged with smoke from the hearth where barley was dried over open flames. That's why the taste lingers with a faint char, something historians still argue whether people liked or just tolerated. Because nothing else was safer. The brewer scratches his head, mutters about adding a pinch of bog myrtle, and pours yet another sample for himself. Quirky, yes, but true. Herbs like wormwood and even henbane sometimes found their way into ale, creating effects far stranger than sleepiness. Imagine drifting off with visions, not from dreams, but from the drink itself. A cat slinks across the floor, tail flicking as it eyes a mouse scurrying near a grain sack. The brewer laughs dully, watching the chase like it's the most entertaining theater he's seen all week. You can feel the fatigue creep into his bones. His stirring slows, his words slur. Brewing is supposed to be precise, a measured balance of malt, yeast, and time. But as he leans against the vat, lids drooping, you wonder if this batch will turn out drinkable at all. Maybe that's why every medieval town had both brilliant ale and truly dreadful swill, depending on whether the brewer stayed awake. You lean back against the rough plaster wall, hearing the faint creak of beams above. The room hums with the drowsy rhythm of bubbling liquid, like a sleepy heartbeat. Your own eyelids get heavier, in sympathy with the brewers. Somewhere outside, a church bell tolls, its echo reminding you that time keeps moving even when you doze. One sip, one yawn, one slow step closer to slumber. If you haven't already, this is a lovely moment to gently tap that like button and subscribe, so you don't miss the rest of these quiet wanderings through history. It helps the channel, but more than that, it keeps our sleepy little tavern filled with company. You exhale, warm air misting the rim of your mug. The taste lingers, sour-sweet, almost earthy. The brewer sighs, slipping into the kind of half-dream where work continues, but mind wanders. And as his hand stirs slower, your own breathing slows with it, drifting toward the next chapter of this long, quiet night. You shuffle through the cloisters, your breath visible in the cold stone corridors, and the echo of your footsteps bounces against walls that feel as though they've been standing forever. You can almost hear the hushed murmur of monks, each wrapped in thick woolen robes, sandals scraping against the flagstones. Outside, the wind pushes at the heavy oak doors, rattling them as though the night itself wants to sneak inside. But you're not here to admire architecture or to admire the intricate carvings of saints and angels in the stone. You're here because the bell has tolled again, and your sleep, if you manage to have any, has been interrupted. The monastery runs on the strict rhythm of the divine office, a sequence of prayers sung at specific hours. Matins might begin in the darkest part of the night, dragging you from your straw mattress, while your body still aches with fatigue. Historians still argue whether monks actually enjoyed this rigid schedule, or whether they endured it with silent frustration. But the records suggest a discipline that bordered on relentless. Imagine trying to sleep through this, knowing that before your dreams can settle in, a bell will insist that you wake again. The sound of that bell is not delicate. It's not a soothing wind chime tinkling in a garden. It is a deep, iron-throated clang, resonating in your chest, vibrating against your ribs. You stir reluctantly, like the brewer who tasted too much ale earlier. But here you have no choice. Your place in the cloister demands obedience. You rise, eyes half shut, mouth dry, mind scratching against your skin. Even the cat you saw earlier in the tavern would have complained, tail twitching in defiance. But you trudge forward because sleep, to a monk, was not indulgence. It was something rationed, something surrendered. And yet, despite this discipline, there is a strange comfort to the monotony. You feel the rhythm of the chants wrapping around you, a drone of Latin syllables, deep voices blending like an organ that breathes through human lungs. The candles flicker, releasing wisps of beeswax smoke into the vaulted air. The scent is faint but persistent, clinging to your hair, your sleeves, your very skin. You let your gaze wander across the choir stalls, polished smooth by generations of weary monks who leaned their elbows against them in quiet exhaustion. One mainstream fact worth savoring. Monasteries across Europe were often the guardians of time itself. Their bells didn't just govern the monks. They governed villages and towns that depended on those chimes to regulate daily life. Farmers rising for the fields, craftsmen opening their shops, travelers marking their hours, all borrowed their schedule from the cloister's rhythm. It's a detail that makes your own yawning presence here feel almost universal. Your sleep is broken, but so is everyone else's. You glance at Brother Anselm, seated 2 rows down. His head nods forward, lips still moving with the chant, but eyelids sinking like lead. One moment his voice holds, the next it dips, as though he is about to tumble into dreams right there in the choir. The abbot clears his throat, and suddenly Brother Anselm jerks upright, muttering a prayer with newfound clarity. You smother a laugh. Yes, even the most devout aren't immune to dozing when the hours drag. It's a reminder that discipline is one thing, human fatigue quite another. And there are quirky stories, too. Some records suggest that monks occasionally tied their hair to the choir stalls with bits of string, just to keep their heads from slumping in sleep. Whether it's exaggerated or not, the image is oddly comical. Rows of men chanting, each tethered like reluctant marionettes, bobbing in rhythm with the liturgy. You try to picture yourself with your head tied up, and the absurdity makes you smile faintly, even as your eyelids grow heavy once more. The debate among historians lingers, of course. Some say that medieval sleep was naturally segmented, that people expected to wake in the middle of the night for prayer, or even casual reflection, and then drift back into a second sleep until dawn. Others argue that the harshness of the schedule forced bodies into exhaustion, leaving monks sleep-deprived and prone to illness. You're left to wonder which is true as the chanting rises and falls like waves lapping at a shore. The cold creeps in despite the candlelight. Your fingers grow stiff, your toes numb inside your sandals. The drone of voices begins to feel hypnotic, and you catch yourself drifting in rhythm with the chants. The air is thick, yet strangely calming, and you can't help but let your imagination wander. What if you simply fell asleep right here? Would anyone notice? Perhaps Brother Anselm would, and maybe he'd smirk knowingly, grateful that someone else joined him in secret rebellion against the iron bell. You think of the brewer again, leaning against his barrel, and realize that in two very different ways, both he and the monk are victims of fatigue. One drowses because of drink, the other because of discipline. You, caught between their worlds, are swaying somewhere in the middle, half listening, half dreaming. The bells toll again, signaling another change in prayer. You rise with the others, spine stiff, lips whispering words you only half understand. The sound rolls over you, and the Latin phrases blur into something closer to lullabies. There's no room here for wild dreams of goats and omens, no room for warm mugs of ale. There is only rhythm, ritual, and the quiet surrender of sleep to duty. Still, in that surrender lies an odd beauty. You look at the stained glass high above, moonlight piercing through the colors to cast muted blues and reds onto the flagstones. The shadows ripple as though the saints themselves shift restlessly, tired of standing watch through centuries. And you too feel like a shadow, drifting forward. Your body here, but your mind slipping away, wandering through corridors of half-formed thought. Somewhere outside, the wind carries the sound of wolves howling in the distant woods. The monks ignore it, their chants steady, unbroken, as though to remind the world that nothing, not wolves, not wind, not drowsy eyelids, will disrupt their rhythm. You find yourself both impressed and weary. The night stretches endlessly, a tapestry of voices and bells, until finally you realize, perhaps this is the true sleep, not the kind on a mattress, but the kind you find in repetition, in the slow rocking of chant and silence. The candles burn lower, wax pools at their bases, dripping down like tired sighs. You close your eyes, not quite asleep, not quite awake, suspended in that fragile space where history itself begins to feel like a dream. And as the last bell of the night echoes across the cloister, you realize you've been drifting for minutes, lulled by voices meant not to entertain, but to endure. You step away from the stone cloister and out into the faint gray of early dawn. The wind carries the smell of wood smoke, damp earth, and something faintly sour. Perhaps yesterday's stew left too long in a pot. You follow the uneven track toward a small village where cottages lean into each other like weary companions. The roofs sag under thatch, patched in places with straw so fresh it almost glows against the weathered brown. Dogs stir at your approach, tails thumping, though even they seem reluctant to leave the warmth of the hearth. Inside one of these cottages, you duck through a low doorway. The ceiling is smoky, blackened with years of fire that has no chimney to escape through, only a small hole cut in the thatch. Your eyes sting. The air is thick, almost chewable, and yet the family inside barely notices. They have lived in this haze their entire lives. A fire smolders in the center, its orange glow painting the faces of children curled in blankets that look more like sacks. Their parents rest on straw pallets stuffed with whatever filler was at hand. Rushes, reeds, even moss. You sit gingerly, straw prickling through the thin fabric of your tunic. You feel every stalk. Sleep here is not about comfort. It is about collapsing into whatever surface keeps you off the frozen ground. A mainstream fact is worth pausing on. Medieval peasants often slept in shifts, sometimes described as first sleep and second sleep. They would rest after sundown, wake sometime after midnight to tend fires or whisper quiet conversations, then return to bed until dawn. Historians still argue whether this was universal or only common in certain regions, but the evidence suggests that many people found it entirely natural. You too feel the odd rhythm. It is not strange to wake in the night, stir the fire, and slip back into dreams. Quirky details add to the picture. You notice a dried bundle of herbs dangling from the rafters. At first you think it might be for cooking, but the mother of the cottage insists it keeps away nightmares. She calls it sleep grass, though you recognize chamomile and mugwort tangled together. Whether it works or not is another matter, but she places full faith in it, as though bad dreams could be smoked out like flies. The children breathe steadily, untroubled, and perhaps that is proof enough. The father snores loudly, so loudly that the rafters almost shake. You suppress a smile. Snoring, of course, is timeless, a universal reminder that no matter the century, some things never change. The mother tosses an elbow into his ribs, and the rhythm quiets, at least for a moment. You lie back, staring upward, watching the smoke twist and vanish through the hole. Your eyes water, your throat itches, but slowly your body adjusts. The cold creeps in as the fire burns low. You shift, tugging a rough woolen blanket over your shoulders. It smells of sheep and soil, a heavy scent that clings even when you try to shake it away. Yet beneath the weight of the blanket, there is a certain safety, like sinking under a river that refuses to let you rise. Sleep is heavy here, as heavy as the air. You think again about segmented sleep. Waking in the middle of the night feels less like a problem and more like an opportunity. Couples whisper together, their voices muffled under the blanket. Older children slip outside, perhaps to relieve themselves or to look at the stars polluted by city smoke. Farmers might even use the hour to check on animals. Imagine stepping into the cold, torch in hand, to see if your cow still breathes steadily, your chickens still roost. The world feels different in these midnight hours, quieter but oddly alive. You shift again, trying to find comfort on the pallet. Straw sticks into your arm, pricks your thigh, but the body adapts. Sleep does not demand perfection, it only demands surrender. You think of the brewer in his tavern, dozing against his vat. You think of the monk nodding in the cloister. And here, among peasants, you realize the truth. Everyone wrestles with sleep, no matter their station. The fire sputters. Sparks leap like tiny fireflies before vanishing into the smoke. A child stirs, mumbling something in a dream. You hear the mother's whisper, perhaps a charm, perhaps just soothing nonsense, and the child settles back into slumber. The rhythm of breathing fills the room again, steady, layered, a chorus of sleepers sharing one space. Privacy is rare here. Entire families sleep in the same room, sometimes even with animals, tucked inside for warmth. A goat bleats softly in the corner, shifting on its tether. Its musky odor mingles with the smoke, the straw, the wool, until the entire cottage smells of life itself, sweat, fire, and earth. A rooster crows prematurely, confused by the faint moonlight. You groan softly, though no one else seems to mind. Sleep in this world is always fragile, easily broken, yet just as easily reclaimed. You close your eyes, drift for minutes, wake again to the sound of wind pressing against the walls. And then, just as your mind settles, you recall that historians still debate whether peasants truly found this life bearable, or whether chronic fatigue shadowed their days. The truth is lost in the smoke, as unreachable as the stars above the thatch. You turn, trying not to jab your elbow into the snoring father beside you. The blanket slips, the cold sneaks in, and you tug it back again. The cycle repeats until you stop resisting, letting discomfort melt into a kind of dull background. Your breathing slows, matching the rhythm of the family around you. The air shifts as dawn inches closer. Light filters through the cracks in the walls, faint, uncertain, but enough to paint stripes across the straw floor. The family stirs. The father stretches, yawning so loudly you think the rafters will rattle again. The children rub their eyes, hair wild, cheeks red from the cold. The mother prods the fire, coaxing it back into life. Embers glow, smoke rises, and the room slowly warms again. You sit up, shoulders stiff, hair smelling of smoke. Your body aches, but there is a strange satisfaction in surviving a night on straw, as though you've earned the day ahead. You step outside into the morning air. The frost crunches beneath your feet, and the village is already stirring. Smoke curls from neighboring cottages. Dogs bark. Chickens flap their wings in irritation. The sky glows pale gold, the sun inching upward like a tired man climbing from bed. And you too rise with it, yawning, stretching, blinking into the day. Your mind drifts back over the night. Segmented sleep, herbal charms, communal warmth, the debate that refuses to settle. Was it misery, or was it simply the way things were? Perhaps both. What you do know is that you survived the smoky haze, the straw prickles, the endless snores, and in that endurance lies the simple story of countless medieval nights. You walk on, leaving the cottage behind, your footsteps crunching against the frosty earth. Ahead lies a road that winds toward larger houses, toward castles and courts, where kings and queens prepare for slumber with far greater ceremony. Your pace is steady, your breath visible in the morning chill, and your thoughts linger on how strange it is that no matter how high or low a person's station, the battle for rest is always the same. You walk from the smoky cottages toward the looming walls of a royal residence. The path grows smoother, cobblestones replacing mud, and you notice the air feels a little less damp, as though privilege itself repels the weather. Guards yawn at their posts, spears resting against their shoulders, helmets tilted back to let in the morning chill. Even the watchmen, men tasked with vigilance, cannot escape the weight of drowsiness. You smile faintly, realizing that while peasants fight with straw pallets, kings and queens struggle with something far more elaborate, the pomp of royal sleep. The heavy gates open, and you step into a courtyard lined with banners, their fabric sluggish in the wind. Servants hurry back and forth, arms loaded with linens, cushions, and trays of warm, spiced wine. You follow them into a hall where the ceiling rises so high it almost disappears in shadow. Here the smell is not of smoke and goats, but of polished wood, beeswax polish, and the faint perfume of dried lavender. You rub your eyes, squinting at the sheer spectacle of it. Sleep, in this setting, is no casual collapse into straw. It is a performance, a ritual, stage-managed to remind everyone watching that even slumber is royal business. At the far end of the hall, a chamber glows with candlelight. The royal bed dominates the space, carved with scenes of hunts and battles. Its canopy draped with velvet dyed so deeply crimson it almost drinks in the light. You climb onto a small stool just to see the top of the mattress, piled high with layers of feathers, silks, and embroidered sheets. Compared to the prickly straw you endured last night, this feels like resting on a cloud fashioned by human hands. One mainstream fact stands firm. Medieval monarchs often traveled with their beds. Wherever the court moved, carts followed behind, carrying the disassembled pieces of frame, mattress, and canopy. So the sovereign never slept without familiar comfort. A servant fluffs pillows so vigorously you worry he might collapse them into dust. Another sprinkles herbs, rosemary, lavender, sometimes even rose petals, between the sheets. The fragrance is heady, overwhelming, and you cough softly. The queen glances your way, half amused, as if to say, "Yes, it's a bit much, isn't it?" Still, the symbolism matters. Fragrance wards away foul air, believed to spread illness, and it adds to the aura of luxury. Quirky tidbits slip into your observations. For example, some courts maintained official bed testers, servants who had to lie down first to prove no assassin had hidden beneath the covers or slipped poison into the sheets. Imagine the poor soul yawning under velvet, wishing desperately he could stay asleep. But knowing his duty was to rise as soon as the monarch entered, you picture yourself as that servant, head buried in perfumed pillows, and almost laugh aloud at the thought. Historians still argue whether such elaborate displays were genuinely restful, or whether they became another burden of image and expectation. After all, when you sleep surrounded by attendants, guards, and the heavy weight of political scheming, how restful can slumber truly be? You imagine the king rolling onto one side, eyes half open, mind racing with the day's petitions. Does he sleep soundly, or does he count the years of his reign like sheep, anxious for what each morning may bring? The ritual of royal bedtime continues. Courtiers whisper prayers, attendants kneel, and candles are snuffed one by one until only a few flicker beside the bed. The queen slips beneath the sheets, her crown set aside, but her presence still regal. The king follows, grunting softly as he settles into the feather mattress. A silence fills the room, punctuated only by the faint hiss of wax and the shuffle of slippers retreating toward the door. And yet, even here, sleep is imperfect. You notice the king turning restlessly, tugging at covers that feel too heavy, shifting a pillow that refuses to yield. The queen sighs, adjusting her own cushion, and you realize with gentle amusement that despite the velvet, despite the perfume, despite the ritual, they face the same small annoyances as the peasant family on straw. Wealth softens the edges, but it cannot erase the human body's stubborn refusal to be perfectly comfortable. The night stretches long. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, though not strongly enough to wake the royals. Guards pace below the windows, boots striking a steady rhythm against stone. You listen closely and imagine the echo as a lullaby, a repetitive pattern lulling even the watchmen themselves. Sleep, it seems, creeps into every role, from monarch to soldier, binding them together in the same quiet surrender. You walk softly through the chamber, eyes drawn to the tapestries lining the walls. Scenes of hunting, battles, and mythical beasts stare back at you in woven color. They are meant to dazzle, but at this hour, they only seem to watch silently, witnesses to centuries of uneasy sleep. You picture the brewer again, nodding against his vat, and the monk swaying in his choir stall. Compared to them, the royals have cushions and pomp, but the same drowsiness lingers. History feels less like a hierarchy and more like a shared yawn across classes. Somewhere near dawn, the silence breaks. The queen stirs, whispering something into the king's ear. He mutters back, still half asleep. Perhaps it is nothing more than idle words, or perhaps it is strategy carried even into the borderlands of dreams. You cannot tell, but the intimacy of shared wakefulness in the middle of the night feels almost ordinary, reminding you that even within the rigid framework of monarchy, humanity persists. A servant creeps in with a candle, refilling the air with fragrance. You almost pity him, awake at this hour to tend a fire that already burns. His eyes are heavy, his steps slow, and you wonder how many more nights he can endure before exhaustion overtakes him. The royals may recline on velvet, but their attendants suffer the brunt of sleeplessness, their lives measured in service to the slumber of others. The faintest gray leaks into the sky beyond the shutters. The king snores softly now, his rest finally won. The queen turns, slipping back into stillness. Attendants prepare quietly for the morning ritual, laying out robes and crowns. And you, weary of watching, step back into the corridor, feeling the chill of stone against your bare feet. You leave behind the velvet, the feathers, the perfumed sheets, and step once more into the larger world. As the doors close behind you, you cannot help but think, whether on straw or on silk, whether beside a goat or beside a crown, the struggle for comfort is the same. Sleep humbles all, erasing titles and flattening hierarchies, at least until the next bell tolls or the rooster crows. You breathe deeply, exhale slowly, and continue down the corridor toward the next story waiting in the shadows of history. You leave the royal chamber behind, stepping once more into a drafty corridor. The torches sputter, shadows stretch across the stone, and you follow a narrow stair downward toward a quieter room. Here, the air smells less of velvet and lavender, more of dust and linen, and you find yourself face to face with one of history's most underestimated companions, the pillow. You might shrug, thinking of the thing you adjust every night without much thought, but in the past it carried its own curious journey, from stiff beginnings to feathery indulgence, and each stage shaped how sleep itself felt. The first pillow you encounter looks more like a block than a cushion. A carved piece of wood, smoothed just enough so it won't splinter against your cheek. You set your head down gingerly, immediately aware of how unyielding it is. Mainstream fact: in the earliest medieval centuries, pillows were not standard across all households. Many peasants slept without them, while wealthier homes used versions stuffed with straw or rags. Wood or stone supports existed too, holdovers from even older traditions, the idea being that a raised head kept away evil spirits or creeping pests. You can't help but smirk, imagining yourself waking with a stiff neck, but feeling spiritually safer. The air grows thick with the smell of dried herbs again, and you notice another detail. Someone has tucked sachets of rosemary and lavender into a linen cover. The pillow still feels lumpy, but at least it smells better than smoke and sweat. Quirky detail here. Some households stuffed pillows with dried flowers, or even spices, convinced the aroma would ward off nightmares or illnesses carried by bad air. You lean closer, inhaling deeply, until you sneeze hard enough to startle the quiet. Soothing? Maybe. Practical? Questionable. But history rarely asked permission before mixing comfort with superstition. You roll onto another pillow, softer this time. Feathers shift beneath linen, molding faintly to the shape of your head. It's not perfect. You can still feel stiff quills poking through, but compared to wood, it feels like a miracle. A servant fusses nearby, patting and shaking it, eager to keep the royal standard high. Historians still argue whether feather pillows were widespread among wealthy townsfolk or reserved mostly for nobility. The records show scattered references, some praising the comfort, others mocking it as excessive indulgence. You lie there, caught between perspectives, unsure but whether to sigh in gratitude or chuckle at the fuss. The room is filled with cushions of every variety. Some are embroidered with gold thread, more art than utility. Others are patched, faded, practical survivors of daily use. You run your hand over the fabric, feeling how the weave changes. Rough wool here, softer linen there. A gentle draft from the window stirs the pile, releasing a faint, dusty scent, like old books forgotten in an attic. You sneeze again, then chuckle at yourself. Pillows may promise rest, but they rarely behave perfectly. You imagine a medieval child clutching one of these rag-stuffed lumps, pulling it close, not because it was comfortable, but because it was familiar. That, perhaps, is the true charm of the pillow. It becomes a companion, a small anchor in the restless sea of sleep. The thought makes you yawn involuntarily, your jaw cracking as your eyes sting with tiredness. You realize you've been following pillows through centuries without noticing your own head tilting lower, closer to rest. The light in the chamber flickers lower, shadows sliding along the wall. Somewhere outside, a dog barks, its echo softened by stone. You let yourself sink further into the feather-stuffed cushion, though a quill pokes your cheek annoyingly. The mix of comfort and irritation feels symbolic. History rarely hands you pure softness. There's always a stiff reminder that indulgence comes at a price. You remember the brewer nodding against his vat, the monk tethering his head to the choir stall, the peasant collapsing on straw. Each lacked what you now hold, this soft nest of feathers. Yet even with it, you still twist and turn, searching for the elusive, perfect angle. It dawns on you that the human quest for the right pillow may be one of the most eternal struggles of all. The chamber grows quieter. You hear faint whispers from servants in the corridor, carrying news of the household's evening routine. The queen requires lavender sachets. The king wants his cushion plumped twice before bed. The courtiers gossip about whether goose feathers are softer than duck. You smirk again. Imagine political debates derailed by such trivial arguments. Yet to the sleepless, the trivial often feels monumental. A candle guttering in the corner throws long, sleepy beams across your pillow. You roll onto your back, staring up at beams overhead. The embroidered cushion beneath your head slides slightly, too slick to stay put, and you tug it back into place. You're reminded again of how fragile comfort is, how easily it slips away, even when draped in finery. The irony is not lost on you, that after centuries of refinement, pillows still frustrate sleepers everywhere. The air cools as night deepens. You tug a blanket closer, pressing your face into the scented linen. The aroma of herbs calms your breath, though the prick of quills persists. You find yourself drifting, thoughts softening, words blending into each other like threads in a tapestry. Yet just as you surrender, a servant coughs in the corridor, and the moment shatters. You sigh, adjusting the pillow again, realizing how sleep often teases before it allows itself to arrive. You picture, for a moment, an entire castle of sleepers adjusting pillows, tugging blankets, muttering complaints in the dark. From the grand canopy bed of the king to the modest pallet of a servant, all share this small ritual. Shift, turn, fluff, sigh, repeat. Sleep is democratic after all, ignoring titles and wealth, humbling everyone with the same restless shuffle. Historians write of wars, treaties, revolutions, but rarely of these private battles with lumps and quills. And yet, in their silence lies the truest story, the nightly negotiation between body and bedding. You press your cheek deeper into the cushion, half smiling, half grimacing at its uneven give. A thought crosses your mind that perhaps, centuries later, sleepers still haven't solved this puzzle. The perfect pillow remains as mythical as dragons or philosopher's stones. Your eyelids grow heavy. The fire in the hearth pops softly, each crackle like a lullaby. You let your breath slow, chest rising and falling with the rhythm of the flames. The pillow beneath you grows warmer, molding faintly to your shape, or perhaps your tired mind convinces you it does. Either way, you no longer resist. You let the weight of your head rest fully, surrendering to the softness, however flawed. Outside, dawn waits patiently beyond the horizon. But for now, in this chamber of pillows, you feel the quiet truth of history, that sleep has never been perfect, but it has always been essential. And as your mind drifts, you realize the journey continues, carrying you from perfumed cushions into the bustling markets where traders snore on sacks of grain. Unaware of how their dreams keep the world turning, you leave the chamber stacked with pillows and step out into the chill air of a medieval town square. The sky above is a muted gray, streaked with soot from countless hearths, and the smell of roasted meat mingles with the tang of manure. Traders shuffle between stalls, their cloaks drawn tightly, their voices low as they count the day's last coins. You wander through the maze of canvas awnings, wooden carts, and barrels, stacked so high, you wonder how they don't topple. The market feels as though it never truly ends, as if it breathes even when everyone pretends it sleeps. You pause beside a stall selling dried fish, the odor sharp enough to make your nose twitch. The merchant, an older woman with lines etched into her cheeks, nods wearily, her eyelids drooping as though she might nap between customers. You notice a sack of barley at her feet, serving not only as storage, but also as a makeshift cushion. She leans against it when the crowd thins, her head tilting, lips parting in a faint snore. A mainstream fact settles into your mind. In many medieval towns, markets did not close neatly at sunset. Night watchmen patrolled, bakers prepared for dawn, and traders often lingered, sleeping among their goods to guard them. Sleep and commerce wove together until you couldn't tell one from the other. The ground crunches beneath your boots, littered with straw and husks. A cart creaks by, pulled by a horse with eyes nearly closed. You smirk, realizing even the animals look drowsy after a day of hauling. The cart driver hums softly, more to keep himself awake than to entertain anyone. His melody falters, drifts, and you catch yourself swaying to the rhythm, as though the entire market conspires to lull you toward slumber. You pass another stall, where a young man curls against a mound of wool sacks. His mouth hangs open, a line of drool glistening in the lantern light. You chuckle under your breath, then quickly look away, as though caught spying on someone's most vulnerable moment. Quirky detail here. Some traders were known to sleep directly on their wares, believing the contact would ward off thieves. Grain merchants napped on sacks, fabric sellers under bolts of cloth, even cheesemongers resting with their wheels stacked like a fortress. You imagine waking up smelling like a wheel of Gouda, and the thought makes you grin despite the drowsy air. Historians still argue whether markets were truly as ceaseless as folklore claims, or whether the stories of constant bustle are romantic exaggerations. Records mention quiet stretches at night, but also anecdotes of bakers working by torchlight, taverns spilling drinkers into the square, and guards shooing away loiterers long after midnight. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, a rhythm of noise, pause, and noise again, like the breath of a sleeping giant. Lanterns sway overhead, their light dim, casting golden halos on the cobblestones. You let your fingers trail across a barrel, the wood cool and damp with spilled ale. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs, followed by the unmistakable sound of snoring. You follow it to a cluster of porters huddled against a wall, their cloaks drawn tightly as they sleep in shifts. One keeps his eyes half open, muttering incoherently, his hand still clutched around a rope tied to a cart. Duty and exhaustion cling to him equally. The air is restless here. A tavern door bursts open, laughter spilling into the square. Two men stagger out, their arms around each other, singing badly, their words slurred. They pause to lean against a wall, heads nodding, and for a moment you wonder if they'll simply slide down into sleep where they stand. You stifle a laugh, reminded of the brewer who slipped into drowsy mistakes. The line between work, drink, and sleep blurs until you cannot separate them. You wander toward the bakery. The scent of yeast, butter, and warm bread envelops you, thick enough to taste. Through a half-open shutter, you see bakers at work, sleeves rolled up, eyes heavy but determined. Their hands knead dough with a rhythm that feels hypnotic. One pauses, wiping sweat from his brow, then rests his head briefly against the flour-dusted table. His eyes close, his shoulders sag, until a companion nudges him sharply. You smile, sensing how close he was to drifting. The cycle of bread demands it. Knead, rest, bake, much like the cycle of sleep, though here the two blend uncomfortably together. The cobblestones grow slick with spilled water and fruit skins. You tread carefully, your body swaying with fatigue, not your own, but borrowed from everyone around you. The market seems to breathe it into you, the collective sigh of dozens of bodies yearning for rest. Even the lantern flames look sleepy, leaning sideways as though they too wish to snuff themselves out. You duck beneath an awning, listening to the rustle of fabric overhead. A trader adjusts his cloak, muttering something you can't quite catch, then drifts back into sleep. His head rests on a pile of onions, and you suppress a laugh, imagining the morning breath that awaits him. These are the small indignities history rarely records, but which speak louder than royal canopies or velvet pillows. Humanity, it seems, will sleep anywhere, no matter how absurd. The night deepens. You hear the watchman's staff tapping against the stones, steady, measured. He mutters the hour, his voice echoing against walls. A dog barks in reply, then falls silent. The market exhales again, quieter now, though never fully asleep. Somewhere, a rooster crows prematurely, confused by the torchlight. You groan softly, sharing in the collective irritation of sleepers everywhere. You lean against a barrel yourself, feeling the wood press against your back. Your eyelids grow heavy, and you understand the temptation of these traders. A sack of grain suddenly feels inviting, a barrel sturdy enough to hold dreams. You close your eyes for a moment, breathing in the mingled scents of bread, fish, and smoke. It is not pleasant, yet somehow it comforts, a reminder that life persists, even in weariness. The market shifts again. A cart arrives, wheels squeaking, horse snorting, and voices rise in negotiation despite the hour. You open your eyes reluctantly, realizing that true silence never comes here. This place lives on the boundary of sleep, never fully resting. never fully awake. And you, caught within it, sway like one of the lanterns, drifting but tethered. You step away at last, leaving behind the snoring merchants, the sleepless bakers, the stubborn watchmen. The path leads you beyond the square, into streets darker, quieter, where the glow of torches fades and the hush of night deepens. You think back to the brewer's drowsy mistakes, the monk's midnight chant, the peasant's smoky palate, the queen's perfumed pillows. Now the market adds its own voice, a chorus of snores, coughs, and whispered bargains at midnight, all pieces of the same long story, stitched together by fatigue. The cobblestones end, replaced again by dirt, softer beneath your boots. Ahead, the houses thin, and fields stretch into the distance. Sleep here will no longer be broken by watchmen or tavern songs, but by something more elemental, the fear of fire. Already you see faint glows in distant cottages, flames flickering too eagerly. You sigh, realizing that even in dreams, the threat of sudden blaze keeps eyes half open, bodies restless. And so you keep walking, stepping from market bustle toward the anxious glow of hearths that never fully sleep. You leave the restless market square behind, stepping into narrower streets where the hum of trade fades into the occasional creak of shutters and the bark of a distant dog. The air is damp and faintly acrid. A faint orange glow flickers behind windows, the shadows of flames dancing against the timber frames. You draw closer to a cottage, noticing how the fire inside pushes light through every crack. The people sleeping within must feel its warmth, but they must also keep one eye half open, for every flame is both comfort and danger. You duck into one of the houses, stooping under the lintel. The air hits you immediately, heavy with smoke and soot. A fire burns low in the center, embers glowing like red eyes. The room is filled with the scent of resinous wood, sharp pine mingled with damp oak, and you cough softly. Above the hearth, a clay lamp flickers, its small flame quivering with every draft. The shadows stretch across the plaster walls like restless spirits. Mainstream fact. Throughout the medieval period, open flames were constant companions in homes. Fire was necessary for warmth, for cooking, and for light, yet it carried immense risk. Wooden beams, straw roofs, and woolen bedding all turned a single spark into catastrophe. Entire towns could vanish in one night, flames leaping from roof to roof faster than water could quench them. You feel the weight of that knowledge pressing on you as you stare at the orange glow. A child stirs on a straw pallet, rolling too close to the hearth. The mother reaches out in her sleep, pulling him back without fully waking. You smile faintly at her instinct. Families lived with this tension daily. The fire that fed them could betray them if left untended. Even sleep became a negotiation, balancing the need for warmth with the fear of waking to a blaze. You glance at the clay lamp again. Its flame wavers dangerously, oil sputtering as though running low. Quirky tidbit. Some households added salt to the oil to slow the burning, convinced it prevented sudden flare-ups. Others used animal fat mixed with herbs, which not only fueled the lamp, but added odd scents to the room. Imagine drifting to sleep with the faint perfume of thyme or sage rising from your bedside lamp. Pleasant enough, until you realize it might also attract pests. You chuckle softly, knowing comfort and hazard often shared the same wick. Historians still argue whether people grew accustomed to this anxiety, or whether it gnawed at them each night. Some chronicles describe strict rules, candles snuffed at certain hours, fires banked under ash, while others hint that many simply slept lightly. half aware of smoke or sparks. You tilt your head back, staring at the thatch roof. It rustles faintly in the wind, dry stalks waiting for any excuse to catch. You understand now why fear of fire lived in the marrow of these people. The father in the cottage shifts, rising briefly to poke the fire. Sparks leap upward, showering against the soot-stained beams. Your heart clenches, though he acts as though it's routine. He piles on damp logs, muttering about the cold, then curls back under his blanket. The fire hisses, steam rising, and the danger abates. For now, you breathe slowly, trying to match the family's calm, though your own eyelids resist closing in such a place. Beyond the cottage, you wander toward larger homes where wax candles glow. The wealthy could afford beeswax, its flame steadier, its smoke gentler. The scent is faintly sweet, pleasant compared to the acrid tallow used by most. You approach a chamber where servants move quietly, trimming wicks with small scissors. Each motion feels rehearsed, almost ceremonial. Yet even here, accidents happen. A careless gesture, a sleeve too close to the flame, and silk draperies ignite like dry straw. You pause before a great hall. Dozens of candles flicker in iron chandeliers, their light golden and grand. The ceiling vanishes into shadow, though you can almost imagine soot staining every beam. The guests below lounge on benches, drinking and muttering, some already nodding into sleep with goblets still in hand. One snorts awake just in time to prevent spilling wine on his lap. You smile quietly at the image. Fire above, drink below, fatigue binding them together. You let your eyes wander up to the flames overhead. They sway gently, stirred by drafts, a sea of trembling light. The sight is hypnotic, beautiful, and yet you feel the tension behind it. Sleep comes easily under candlelight, but always edged with the fear of waking to smoke. You imagine the brewer again, nodding against his vat, and wonder if he ever worried about knocking over a lantern. The thought almost makes you laugh, though the risk is no joke. Night deepens. You step into a lane where watchmen carry torches, the flames spitting as rain begins to drizzle. The men curse softly, shielding the sparks. Their duty is to patrol, yet even they look half asleep, eyes drooping, steps uneven. You follow the wavering light, aware that the town never truly rests so long as flames burn. Every torch is a guardian and a threat, illuminating the street even as it risks igniting a roof. You pause near a water barrel set out by cautious villagers. Its surface ripples in the breeze, black as ink. The reflection of a candle dances faintly on its surface, shivering with every gust. You reach out, touching the rim, feeling the coolness of damp wood. It comforts you to know that if the worst happened, water might stand ready, though you doubt it would ever be enough. The drizzle strengthens, pattering on the thatch. You exhale, relieved that rain soothes what fire threatens. Yet even as you watch, a window glows brightly, shadows rushing inside as someone stirs the hearth. You shake your head, smiling softly. Humanity cannot resist fire's pull. Even in sleep, people crave its warmth, risk and all. You lean against a wall, eyelids growing heavy. The sound of rain, the flicker of light, the steady breathing of houses around you, all weave together into a lullaby of uneasy calm. You let your thoughts wander, to the monk tying his hair against slumber, to the queen adjusting her perfumed pillow, to the merchant snoring on grain. Each, in their own way, fought against fire, or trusted it too much. Each risked dreams interrupted by smoke. Historians may continue their debates, but you sense the truth in your bones. Fire was never just a tool. It was a companion, a rival, a restless presence that demanded vigilance. To sleep with fire nearby was to sleep with one ear open, one eye half aware, even in the deepest night. The rain softens, candles gutter, embers fade into ash. You watch the last glow dim and finally allow your shoulders to slump. The town exhales with you, a collective sigh of relief as another night passes without catastrophe. You push away from the wall, moving toward the darker streets beyond, where dreams are shaped not by flames, but by potions, charms, and remedies brewed for the restless. You step from the smoke-darkened lane into a smaller street lined with shuttered windows and crooked doorways. Here, the smell changes. It is less of fire and damp wood, more of herbs drying in bundles, sharp and earthy. A faint, bitter sweetness drifts through a crack where light glows, and you pause outside a doorway marked with a painted mortar and pestle. Inside, a woman moves slowly among shelves stacked with jars and packets. She is not a brewer and not a monk, though she borrows something from both. The village healer, whose trade is not prayer or ale, but sleep itself. The room hums with fragrance. Chamomile blossoms hang in bunches, lavender fills cloth sachets, and poppy heads lie scattered in a basket. You brush your fingers along a jar filled with dried mint, its leaves crumbling to dust. Mainstream fact: remedies for sleeplessness were common throughout medieval Europe, often involving herbs steeped in hot water or wine. Poppy water, in particular, was prescribed for restless minds, though its strength could sway between gentle calm and dangerous stupor. You imagine sipping it, the bitter taste coating your tongue, eyelids sliding closed as though weighted by stone. The healer turns, her eyes soft, her hands stained from grinding powders. She gestures toward a stool, inviting you to sit. You oblige, perching awkwardly while she rummages through her jars. She mutters about nightmares, about spirits that creep into dreams, about the heaviness of thoughts that keep villagers awake. Her voice is steady, but her remedies range from practical to peculiar. One mixture she offers is chamomile tea, fragrant and soothing. Another involves murmuring charms over a cup of warm milk, words that slip between prayer and spell. You take the cup, sip, and feel its warmth travel slowly down your throat. Quirky detail emerges when she reaches for another jar, this one filled with dried animal parts. You peer closer, suppressing a smile. Powdered beaver testicles, she claims, mixed with honey, will banish nightmares. You swallow hard, uncertain whether to laugh or gag. She insists it works, though you notice even she avoids tasting her own concoction. You set the jar back gently, deciding chamomile suits you better. Sleep cures, it seems, were never simple. They blended faith, superstition, and desperation in equal measure. Historians still argue whether these remedies held any true medical value, or whether their power lay entirely in belief. Was poppy water genuinely effective, or was it the ritual of brewing, sipping, and surrendering that calmed the restless? Perhaps both. You feel it yourself now. The act of sitting quietly, holding a warm cup, inhaling steam laced with herbs. The body relaxes, even if the ingredients are no more potent than a fragrant memory. You glance at the shelves again. Alongside herbs and powders sit small carved charms, tiny figures, bits of bone, knotted strings. The healer explains that some people tied these near their beds to guard against night terrors. One charm is shaped like a hand, its fingers curled tightly, meant to clutch fear itself. Another is a simple knotted rope, said to confuse spirits by tangling them until morning. You run your fingers over the knots, amused at the thought of nightmares stumbling helplessly inside them. A child enters, rubbing his eyes. His mother follows, weary, explaining that he cries each night in his sleep. The healer nods knowingly, pours a measure of poppy water into a small cup, and whispers words you do not understand. The boy sips reluctantly, his face wrinkling at the taste, then curls against his mother's side. His breathing slows, his eyes flutter shut. You feel a twinge of unease, knowing how strong the mixture can be. Yet the mother's sigh of relief speaks louder than your doubts. For her, sleep is salvation enough. The night outside deepens, wind pressing against the shutters. You hear faint laughter from a tavern down the street, a reminder that some chase sleep, while others chase its opposite. The healer lights a small lamp, its glow soft and steady. She sets it beside your stool, murmuring that flame guards against wandering spirits. You smile faintly, remembering the monk's chants, the peasant's charms, the royal's perfumed pillows. Every class seeks protection from the unknown shapes of night. You sip again from your cup, warmth spreading into your hands. The bitterness lingers, but the comfort grows. Your shoulders relax, your breath steadies. You understand now why remedies mattered, even if their science was uncertain. They provided ritual, something to do when sleeplessness gnawed at the hours. You picture a weary farmer brewing herbs, a noblewoman clutching a sachet of lavender, a monk reciting prayers against demons of the night, all reaching for the same fragile peace. The healer busies herself again, grinding seeds with a pestle. The rhythmic scrape is oddly soothing, like a lullaby disguised as work. You close your eyes briefly, the sound mingling with the soft crackle of the lamp. You think of the brewer's ale, the monk's midnight bell, the peasant's smoky palate, the queen's scented feathers, each shaped by context, yet all yearning for the same surrender. Sleep is not equal, yet it is universal. The child stirs once more, sighs deeply, and settles again. His mother thanks the healer with coins, slipping quietly back into the night. You realize you could stay here for hours, lulled by herbs, scents, and murmurs. But the story must carry you forward, into chambers where sleeplessness is not cured, but courted, where scholars scratch ink by candlelight, refusing rest in pursuit of knowledge. You rise from the stool, setting your cup aside. The healer nods, her eyes already drifting toward another task. You step into the street, cool air brushing your face, the smell of herbs lingering in your hair. Ahead, the faint glow of another lamp beckons, brighter, harsher, the light of study rather than slumber. Your feet carry you toward it, ready to watch how dreams are sacrificed for ink and parchment. You walk slowly from the healer's cottage toward a darker street where light burns late into the night. It is not the soft golden glow of hearth or lamp, but the harsher, steadier flame of a candle, trimmed again and again to fight exhaustion. The air smells of ink, parchment, and smoke, and you hear the faint scratch of a quill long before you see the figure hunched over a desk. The scholar sits there, shoulders stooped, eyes shadowed, his lips moving as he reads lines aloud to himself. You approach quietly, the boards creaking under your steps, though he does not look up. His world is the world of sleepless nights, where study becomes prayer and paper becomes a battlefield. You glance at the desk. Sheets of parchment lie scattered, each crowded with ink blots and hurried notes. A half-burned candle drips wax onto the wood, forming a small mound like a frozen stalagmite. The scholar's hand trembles as he dips the quill, the ink staining his fingers black. Mainstream fact: medieval scholars often worked deep into the night, using precious candles sparingly, but refusing to waste quiet hours. The day was filled with distractions, but the night offered silence, however fragile. Knowledge, they believed, was worth the cost of sleep. You lean closer, noticing the faint smudges beneath his eyes, the way he blinks too slowly, the way his head bobs before jerking upright. He whispers a phrase in Latin, then repeats it, as though the rhythm itself might anchor him. Historians still argue whether this relentless schedule truly produced more wisdom, or whether exhaustion clouded minds more than it clarified. You feel the tension in his body, the determination battling fatigue, and you wonder if any idea can shine clearly at such an hour. The room is cluttered. Stacks of books teeter on benches. Loose parchment drifts across the floor. Quills lie snapped in frustration. A mug of something dark and bitter rests nearby, the liquid half cold. You sniff cautiously, recognizing it as wine infused with rosemary. The scholar mutters that it sharpens his senses, though you see no evidence of it. Quirky tidbit: some believed rosemary brewed in wine or ale would sharpen memory, helping scholars recite long texts. Others clutched amulets or scribbled charms in the margins of their books, convinced learning was as much magic as effort. You smirk at the thought. Half study, half sorcery, all sleeplessness. You let your eyes wander to the window. Outside, the town is hushed, lanterns guttering, markets quiet. Here, though, the world refuses to sleep. The scratching of the quill fills the silence, each stroke a tiny rebellion against fatigue. The scholar mutters about Aristotle, about Augustine, about questions that seem impossible to solve. He dips the quill again, but the ink runs too heavily, blotting the parchment. He groans softly, head falling into his hand. You see the same drowsy slump the brewer had, the same nodding sway of the monk, the same restless toss of the peasant. Learning may dignify fatigue, but it cannot. Sit. The candle gutters suddenly, flame shrinking low. The scholar fumbles for the snuffer, then trims the wick with shaking fingers. The flame steadies, but his eyes do not. He stares at the page as though the words swim away from him. You lean closer, reading over his shoulder. It is a commentary on dreams, whether they are divine, demonic, or merely the echo of daily thought. You grin faintly, realizing the irony. Here he is, writing about dreams, while desperately refusing to enter one himself. Your mind drifts as he works. The rhythm of the quill becomes hypnotic, the faint scratch weaving with the sigh of the wind through the shutters. You rest your chin on your hand, feeling your own eyelids grow heavy. You imagine the scholar collapsing onto the parchment, cheek pressed against ink, waking in the morning with letters imprinted into his skin. Perhaps it already happened last night. The thought makes you chuckle softly, though you stifle it quickly. You notice something tucked beside his papers, a small carved charm in the shape of a recent moon. He fingers it absent-mindedly, perhaps a token to ward off nightmares. He yawns, stretching his arms, then plunges again into the text. The cycle repeats. Scratch, mutter, yawn, scratch. It is both admirable and absurd, and you wonder whether any of this will be remembered centuries from now. The scholar suddenly speaks louder, addressing the silence as though it were a debate. He argues with Aristotle, scolds Augustine, praises one passage, dismisses another. You blink, startled by his energy, though it quickly wanes. His head droops, his voice trails. and soon he is mumbling nonsense into the candlelight. His determination fades as fatigue presses down again. You sigh, watching the inevitable tug of sleep. The candle burns lower, wax pooling across the desk. The room smells thick of smoke and ink. You step back, letting your eyes wander to the rafters overhead, blackened from years of fumes. You imagine hundreds of scholars across centuries repeating the same ritual, scratching away at parchment long past midnight, their thoughts blurred by exhaustion. Historians still debate whether these midnight labors truly advanced learning or merely wasted energy that might have flourished in daylight. The argument feels endless, like the night itself. You lower yourself onto a bench, folding your arms. The scholar drones on, half awake, his words stumbling. You think again of the monk tethering his head, of the queen sighing into her pillow, of the merchant snoring on grain. Sleep comes to each in different forms, but none escape its demand. Even scholars must surrender eventually. You wonder how long before this one collapses, ink still wet on the page. A gust of wind rattles the shutters. The candle flares, then steadies. The scholar startles, jerking upright, scribbling again as though nothing happened. You watch him stubbornly fight the tide, admire his resolve, even as you shake your head. Knowledge may be worth sacrifice, but sleep exacts its price regardless. His hand trembles, his letters grow sloppy, and finally his head dips forward, resting against the parchment. The quill slips from his fingers, landing with a faint clatter. At last, he is still. You rise quietly, stepping toward the door. Behind you, the candle flickers, the ink dries. The scholar snores softly. His words wait for the morning, but his body claims the night. You step back into the street, breathing in the cooler air, relieved to leave the stifling chamber. Ahead, you see the path turn toward a quieter place, where sleep itself becomes prophecy, where dreams are read like scripture. You follow it, your pace slow, your breath even, ready to slip deeper into the strange territory between waking and dreaming. You step into the next stretch of night, where silence feels deeper and shadows heavier. The scholar's chamber with its ink stains and candle stubs fades behind you, replaced by a realm where people fear and worship dreams. Here, sleep itself becomes an oracle, and you find yourself wandering into a village where every murmur about last night's visions spreads as quickly as gossip about weather or crops. The air smells of damp straw and cold ashes. You hear a whisper before you even see the speaker. A woman leans against her cottage door, eyes wide, recounting to her neighbor that she dreamed of a black goat standing at the edge of her bed. The neighbor gasps softly, crossing herself, muttering that such a sign cannot be good. You listen quietly, amused but curious. A mainstream fact comes to mind. In medieval Europe, dreams were often seen as messages, divine, demonic, or at least symbolic. Church fathers like Augustine insisted they might carry meaning, though they also warned against taking them too literally. Still, villagers told each other stories of beasts, storms, and mysterious visitors, hoping to make sense of them before dawn. You glance at the woman again. She insists the goat's eyes glowed red. Her neighbor replies with a tale of her own. She dreamed of spilling milk, which she claims foretells arguments in the household. You smirk faintly, realizing how fragile human peace becomes when every twitch of the mind at night threatens doom by morning. Yet for them, these interpretations are not games, but tools for survival. If dreams warn of famine, they prepare. If dreams hint at betrayal, they guard themselves. You move further into the street. A man stirs at his window, muttering about a serpent slithering through his sleep, He scratches his beard, clearly unsettled. A group of children huddle nearby, trading dream tales, as though they were stories of monsters. Quirky detail surfaces. Some believed certain foods triggered specific visions. Too much cheese, for example, was thought to cause nightmares, while honey promised sweeter dreams. You chuckle softly, picturing yourself blaming last night's goat vision on an extra wedge of hard cheddar. Historians still argue whether such beliefs were held universally or whether they varied wildly between regions and classes. Some sources show scholars dismissing common dream superstitions as nonsense, while others reveal kings consulting interpreters before major battles. You realize that even at the highest levels of power, sleep was mined for meaning, as though history itself depended on what people saw behind closed eyes. You step into a dim chapel. Candles flicker faintly against stone walls, casting halos of gold light. A monk kneels before the altar, whispering about a vision he had. Angels singing from a mountain, their voices urging him toward stricter devotion. His abbot listens solemnly, nodding, yet you sense doubt beneath his calm. Dreams could inspire piety, but they also carried the risk of delusion. One man's revelation was another's heresy. You sit quietly in the back, watching the monk's trembling hands. Sleep offers him clarity, but also terror of being misunderstood. You slip outside again, into the night air thick with frost. The stars wheel above, dazzling yet distant. Villagers point to constellations, weaving them into their dream interpretations. A hunter claims that seeing Orion's belt in sleep means fortune in the next hunt. A shepherd insists that dreaming of the moon turning red portends sickness in the flock. The logic is not exact, but the conviction is steady. You smile, reminded again how humanity bends every tool, even sleep, into a map for navigating uncertainty. A dog whines softly, curling against your feet as you walk. You scratch its ears absent-mindedly, thinking of your own dreams. Were they merely fragments of memory or whispers from somewhere beyond? You chuckle, realizing the question is older than the walls around you, yet still unanswered. The dog yawns, unconcerned with prophecy, and falls asleep without hesitation. You envy its simplicity. The village grows quieter. Most have retreated to their beds, clutching charms or muttering prayers to guard against darker visions. You hear faint snores, the creak of straw, the hiss of cooling fires. Yet even in their rest, the people prepare to wake with stories. Tomorrow, they will gather again to weigh their dreams against tradition, debating whether omens prove true or false. You pass a doorway where a woman ties a knotted rope above her child's bed. She whispers that the knots confuse nightmares, trapping them before they can reach her son. The child sleeps soundly, face peaceful, unaware of the ritual overhead. You shake your head gently, half amused, half touched. Superstition, perhaps, but also love. For parents, any charm that promises safety is worth believing. The night air chills further. You wrap your cloak tighter, pulling it close around your shoulders. Your breath fogs before you as you wander past barns and byres, animals shifting in their stalls. A cow snorts. A hen clucks drowsily. A horse stamps against the floor. You wonder whether animals dream too, and if their movements ever carried meaning to watchful owners. Perhaps a horse twitching in sleep was taken as an omen of travel, or a cow's restless lowing as a sign of poor weather. No doubt someone believed it. Historians still argue whether dreams were genuinely taken as prophetic by entire communities, or whether only the anxious few clung to such interpretations. Written records suggest elites debated dream meaning in theological terms, while folk traditions lean toward practical signs. You find yourself drifting between both explanations, realizing that whether true or not, dreams shaped choices, and choices shaped history. You step into another cottage, faintly lit. An elderly man snores gently, yet beside his bed lies a parchment covered in scrawled notes. He records his dreams each morning, convinced they reveal patterns guiding his life. You read a line, "I saw a river overflow its banks." The next day, the mill wheel broke. Coincidence, perhaps, but he has woven it into conviction. His records stretch years back, ink faded, but still legible. You marvel at his persistence. The candle by his bed gutters low. You watch as wax pools and the flame dwindles, finally sputtering out. Darkness fills the room, leaving only his slow, steady breath. You step outside, letting the cold night wash over you. Above, the stars still blaze, silent witnesses to centuries of restless dreams. You walk onward, feeling your own eyelids heavy, your own thoughts scattered. Perhaps if you slept here, you too would dream of goats, serpents, or angels. Would you wake believing them? Would you tell your neighbors, argue their meaning, plan your day by their whispers? You smile faintly, knowing you might. History, after all, is built as much on belief as on fact. You reach the edge of the village, where the road curves toward distant inns filled with travelers. Their snores will mingle with creaking carts, fleas, and voices in the dark. Ahead, another chapter of sleep waits, less prophetic, but no less restless. You take a deep breath, steady your pace, and follow the road into the uncertain shadows. You follow the road out of the village, boots crunching against frosted dirt, until the faint glow of lanterns beckons ahead. A wooden sign sways on rusty hinges, creaking in the wind. Its paint is faded, but you can just make out the crude image of a bed and a mug. The roadside inn waits for travelers like you, half sanctuary, half hazard, promising food, warmth, and a place to rest. You push the door open, the hinges groaning, and step into a world thick with smells of ale, smoke, sweat, and fried onions. The room is crowded, though it is late. Merchants argue softly over coin. A minstrel plucks a lute string too lazily to finish a tune, and weary travelers slump against tables. The hearth burns low, throwing out more smoke than flame. Above it, a blackened beam creaks, and you wonder how many winters it has endured. The innkeeper waves you over absently, his eyes half shut, his hands still busy polishing a tankard that will never truly shine. You slip onto a bench, listening to the hum of the place. The sound is not peaceful. It is cluttered, fractured. A chorus of snores, coughs, murmured dreams, and clattering mugs. One mainstream fact emerges quickly. Medieval inns were notorious for cramped sleeping arrangements. Guests often shared beds with strangers, not by choice, but by custom, and privacy was almost unknown. You glance around and spot the narrow staircase leading to the loft where pallets lie in rows. You imagine squeezing between two snoring men who reek of sweat and horse, and your shoulders already tense. A merchant nearby leans heavily against a sack of grain, mouth open, snoring loudly enough to rattle the mugs on the table. You smile faintly, reminded of the market traders who dozed on their goods. Here, too, the habit persists. A droplet of drool slides down his chin, glistening in the firelight, until he jerks awake with a grunt, blinking as though surprised the room hasn't vanished. He rubs his eyes, mutters something about thieves, and promptly sinks back into slumber. The innkeeper's wife bustles by, laying down mugs of ale. Her eyes are red, her steps heavy. You suspect she has slept less than anyone here. She scolds a boy who tries to curl under a bench, warning him the floor is too cold. Yet even as she speaks, her own voice cracks with fatigue. The boy ignores her, curling into the straw anyway, and within moments his breathing steadies into sleep. You shake your head softly, amused at how quickly youth surrenders to rest, despite protest. Quirky detail drifts from another corner. A group of pilgrims trade stories, one swearing that fleas bite hardest in inns near crossroads. He insists that St. Christopher himself could not protect a traveler from their itch. Another laughs bitterly, scratching his arm, and agrees. You shift uncomfortably, already feeling phantom itches crawling across your skin. Inns were notorious for vermin, and you glance up the staircase again, wondering what creatures wait among the mattresses. Historians still argue whether inns were primarily places of refuge or places of risk. Records describe theft, brawls, and infestations, yet also emphasize their necessity for travelers who had no safe alternatives. You sense the truth lies somewhere between, a space both comforting and uncomfortable, both haven and hazard. Sleep here is shallow, broken by noise, but still better than the open road. The minstrel strums his lute again, this time letting a soft melody wander into the smoky air. For a moment, the noise hushes. Travelers lean back, eyes closing, letting the notes blur their fatigue. You sigh, relaxing slightly. Yet the song falters when the minstrel yawns, nearly dropping his instrument. He chuckles at himself, muttering that music cannot resist drowsiness either. A soldier at the far table slumps forward, his helmet clattering onto the wood. His companions laugh, shaking him roughly. He jerks upright, eyes wide, hand fumbling for a sword. When he realizes he is safe, he groans and drops back into his seat. You smirk faintly. Even men trained for war cannot fight the simple ambush of sleep. You rise at last and climb the stairs. The loft smells worse than the hall below. Stale sweat, damp straw, and something faintly sour. Rows of pallets stretch along the beams, some occupied, others waiting. You slip onto one, the straw poking through the thin linen cover. Beside you, a man snores thunderously. On the other side, a woman mutters in her sleep, shifting restlessly. Above, the rafters creak with each gust of wind, as though the whole inn sighs with exhaustion. You lie still, staring at the darkness. Every sound feels louder here. The cough of a child, the shuffle of feet, the groan of a beam, the squeak of a mouse. You shift, trying to ignore the itch crawling along your wrist. Real or imagined, you think of the brewer in his tavern, the monk in his choir stall, the queen in her velvet bed, the scholar at his desk. Compared to them, your rest here feels fragile, yet shared. Dozens of strangers breathing together, their dreams colliding in the same space. A traveler nearby begins muttering loudly, recounting his dream in his sleep. He speaks of fire and smoke, of coins spilling from his purse, of a horse running wild. His voice rises, startling those around him, until he quiets again. You exhale, realizing how exposed you are, how easily strangers intrude upon your rest. Yet you also smile faintly. This, too, is history's truth. Sleep rarely belonged solely to the sleeper. It was communal, noisy, imperfect. The hours crawl. Candlelight fades. The loft settles into a chorus of snores, sighs, and shifting straw. You close your eyes, drifting despite discomfort. For a moment, you imagine yourself safe, though the itch of fleas pulls you back. You scratch your arm, groaning softly, then roll to one side, determined to surrender anyway. Historians may argue whether inns were despised or embraced, but you understand the compromise now. To rest here is to accept imperfection, to find comfort in chaos. You let your breath slow, matching the rhythm of those around you. The man beside you snores like a drum. The woman mutters like a whispering stream. The beams creak like distant thunder. Together, they form a strange lullaby, and you finally let go. Morning will come soon, with carts creaking, horses stamping, and travelers rising. But for now, in this crowded loft, you drift on the edge of sleep, carried by the hum of lives colliding under one roof. Ahead lies another chapter, one filled not with inns, but with festivals, where drums pound and banners flutter. And even amidst celebration, fatigue waits in every corner. You breathe deeply, settling into the straw, letting the noise fade as dreams gather again. You leave the cramped loft of the inn behind, stepping back into the cold morning air. The sky is pale, streaked with faint gold, though your body still feels heavy from restless sleep. You walk down the road until voices rise in the distance, laughter, shouts, the thump of drums. As you draw nearer, the sound swells, blending with the smell of roasted meat, spilled ale, and damp wool. A festival spreads before you, filling the square with color and chaos. Banners whip in the breeze, bright against the gray sky. Stalls overflow with pies, spiced wine, and sugared nuts. Musicians strum fiddles, drums beat steadily, and jugglers toss torches that flash in arcs of orange light. Children dart between the crowds, chasing each other through legs, while dogs bark in excited confusion. The air feels alive, vibrating with rhythm, and yet you sense the undercurrent of fatigue. Sleep here is a casualty of joy. Mainstream fact. Medieval festivals often stretched late into the night, fueled by church calendars, seasonal harvests, or civic pride. Entire towns participated, abandoning daily rhythms for celebration. Work paused, fields lay untended, and even monasteries allowed music and feasting. Yet amid this revelry, sleep slipped away, sacrificed to laughter and song. You glance at a man swaying near a barrel of ale, his eyelids drooping even as he lifts his mug. You wander deeper into the crowd. A circle of dancers spins wildly, skirts flaring, boots stamping. The drumbeat pounds against your chest, relentless, hypnotic. You feel yourself swaying with it, though exhaustion tugs at your limbs. A boy collapses onto the grass at the edge, laughing breathlessly before promptly falling asleep where he lies. You smile, amused at how swiftly celebration becomes slumber. Quirky detail emerges from a corner stall. A vendor sells small cakes said to protect against drowsiness. They are flavored with pepper and ginger, sharp on the tongue, meant to keep revelers awake for hours. You buy one, bite into it, and immediately cough as spice scorches your throat. The vendor grins, insisting it works. Perhaps it does, though your watering eyes suggest it is more torture than cure. Historians still argue whether such festivals brought true joy, or whether they exhausted communities more than they revived them. Records mention complaints of theft, drunken brawls, and illnesses spreading through crowded streets. Yet they also describe the relief of breaking routine, of laughing together in a world often ruled by hunger and fear. You look around at the flushed faces, the gleaming eyes, and decide the truth is layered. Joy and weariness lived side by side, inseparable. You pause near a bonfire built in the square's center. Flames leap high, sparks showering into the night sky. People gather around, singing loudly, their voices hoarse. Some sway dangerously close to the blaze, their fatigue dulling caution. A man nods off against a log, his face glowing in the firelight, mouth slack. Someone nudges him awake, laughing, but you see the danger beneath the merriment. Fire, as you know, is both warmth and risk. Even in celebration, its presence demands vigilance. A minstrel climbs onto a barrel, strumming his lute as he sings a ballad of knights and dragons. His voice is rough, cracked by long hours, yet the crowd cheers. Children shout the refrains, clapping their hands, while older folk lean back with glazed eyes. You notice one man snoring softly, his head resting against his wife's shoulder, while she claps in rhythm, unbothered. You laugh quietly, touched by the image, sleep and song sharing the same moment. As night deepens, torches light the square. Shadows flicker across faces, twisting smiles into something ghostly. Ale flows freely, mugs slamming against tables, voices rising higher. You feel the weight of sleeplessness pressing down. Your legs ache, your eyes burn, yet the music refuses to relent. You sit at the edge, watching dancers stumble, their steps less precise, their laughter more ragged. Joy persists, but it grows slurred, slowed by fatigue. A group of pilgrims gathers near you, trading stories of festivals they've seen across the land. One swears he stayed awake for 3 nights straight, fueled by spiced wine and devotion. Another scoffs, scratching his beard, muttering that even saints need rest. The debate grows louder, though none appear eager to end it by sleeping. You chuckle, reminded of the scholar who argued with Aristotle at his desk, refusing to yield to fatigue. Humanity, it seems, loves to debate at the very edge of collapse. The bonfire crackles, sparks drifting like fireflies. Smoke thickens the air, stinging your eyes, making them water. You rub them, blinking, realizing how heavy your lids feel. A woman beside you yawns so wide it seems her jaw might pop. She covers her mouth quickly, embarrassed, then bursts into laughter at herself. Her friends join in, until yawns spread like a contagion through the group. You smirk. Sleep can be as infectious as laughter. Historians still argue whether festivals truly created unity or merely masked tensions. Some accounts praise them as moments when lords and peasants danced side by side, while others insist divisions persisted even in celebration. You watch as a wealthy merchant in fine cloak stumbles past, his purse jingling, while a beggar trails close behind, eyes sharp. The crowd blurs distinctions, yet hunger and hierarchy do not vanish. Sleep may equalize in private, but festivals remind you that public joy is rarely shared evenly. The drums continue, relentless, though slower now. Musicians yawn between notes, rubbing their eyes. Dancers sag against each other, catching breath. You see a boy curled beneath a table, his hand clutching a half-eaten cake. A woman snores softly against a barrel, her hair tangled with ribbons. Even in noise, bodies claim rest where they can. You stretch, feeling your own muscles ache, tempted to curl against the grass beside them. The sky above turns deeper, stars piercing through smoke. The moon hangs low, silver light spilling over the square. Torches burn shorter, their light weaker. The festival lingers, but its energy dwindles, replaced by murmurs and yawns. You walk slowly away, leaving behind laughter fading into snores. Ahead, the road grows quieter, lined with hedges and fields. In the distance, you hear the faint crash of waves, the call of gulls. Sleep will not be found in markets or inns or festivals now, but at sea, where hammocks sway and storms rumble. You breathe deeply, savoring the quiet after noise, though your ears still ring with drums. You think of the brewer dozing against his vat, the monk tied to his stall, the peasant coughing in smoky air, the queen sighing into velvet, the scholar collapsing on parchment, the innkeeper's guests scratching at fleas. Now the festival joins them, a story of joy, laughter, and fatigue, stitched into the long tapestry of sleepless history. You leave the fading sounds of the festival behind and follow the road until the air sharpens with salt. A cool wind brushes your cheeks, carrying the cry of gulls and the distant groan of timbers shifting on waves. Ahead, masts rise like bare trees against the moonlit sky. You step onto the docks, boards creaking beneath your boots, and smell tar, fish, and brine mingled into one heavy breath. Ships bob gently at their moorings, their lanterns swaying with each swell, glowing like tired eyes refusing to close. You climb aboard one, the deck rolling under your feet, and realize that here, sleep itself is rocked by the sea. Sailors move sluggishly, tying ropes, checking sails, muttering half-hearted curses. Their shoulders sag, their eyes narrow, and you recognize the same fatigue you've seen in monks, peasants, and scholars. Yet here, it is painted over with salt and spray. Mainstream fact: sailors often slept in hammocks strung between beams, a practice that balanced comfort with practicality. The swinging motion matched the rhythm of the ship, preventing men from being tossed onto planks during storms. You trail your fingers along one such hammock, the coarse canvas stiff from salt. It sways gently, whispering promises of rest, even as the ship groans around it. A young sailor drops into his hammock, boots still on, arms crossed over his chest. Within moments he snores, oblivious to the shouting above. You smile faintly at the speed of his surrender. Another man climbs into his sling awkwardly, nearly flipping out before settling with a grunt. You imagine him rolling onto the deck in his first attempts, and the thought makes you chuckle softly. Quirky tidbit: sailors sometimes preferred to sleep in coils of rope instead of hammocks, swearing the smell of tar comforted them. You wrinkle your nose, doubtful, though you admit the ropes look inviting in their own rough way. The sea is calm tonight, waves slapping rhythmically against the hull. The sound is steady, like a heartbeat, lulling you toward drowsiness. Yet even in calm, unease lingers. Historians still argue whether life at sea allowed true rest or only shallow naps. Watches were divided into shifts, bells marking the hours, and sailors often woke after just a few hours to climb back on deck. The cycle left men perpetually weary, their bodies never truly adjusting. You sway with the ship, your eyes heavy, and understand how easily exhaustion could consume them. Above, ropes creak, sails flap faintly, gulls cry before vanishing into night. The lantern light flickers, shadows dancing along the beams. You lower yourself into an empty hammock, the canvas rough against your skin. At first, the swaying unsettles you, stomach lurching, but slowly you match its rhythm, back and forth, as though the sea itself hums a lullaby. You close your eyes, hearing snores nearby, the shuffle of boots, the splash of waves. For a moment, you are convinced you could sleep here forever. But storms do not wait for dreams. A sudden gust shakes the ship, sails snapping loudly. Men shout, boots thunder on the deck above. You sit upright, clutching the edge of the hammock as it swings wildly. Rain lashes against the hull, wind howls through the rigging, and the ship lurches violently. Sleep scatters instantly, replaced by the raw pulse of fear. You cling tighter, the hammock tossing you like a toy. Water crashes onto the deck, spraying through cracks. Sailors curse, hauling ropes, their faces pale in lantern light. One man tumbles from his hammock, hitting the planks with a thud. He groans but clambers up, too accustomed to the chaos to complain. You feel your own body tense, adrenaline surging, heart racing. So this is why hammocks matter, not comfort, but survival. To sleep here is to gamble with storms, to trust canvas and rope against the sea's fury. The storm rages for long minutes, the ship groaning, waves pounding. Yet slowly it passes. The rain softens, the wind quiets, the swaying steadies. Sailors return to their hammocks, muttering curses, their exhaustion deeper now. One man curls beneath a wet cloak, shivering, but still manages to drift into dreams. You watch him, amazed at the body's stubborn insistence on rest. Even in chaos, it demands surrender. The air inside the hold grows damp, heavy with mildew and sweat. You wrinkle your nose, pulling the canvas closer. The scent of salt clings to everything: clothes, hair, skin. You imagine how sailors carried it back to land, marked by the sea, even in their sleep. The lantern above flickers lower, casting long shadows. Snoring fills the hold, layered and uneven, yet oddly soothing. You feel yourself slipping again, lulled by rhythm and exhaustion. You think of the brewer with his vat, the monk with his bell, the peasant in smoky haze, the queen beneath velvet, the scholar at his desk, the pilgrim in an inn, the reveler by the bonfire. Each sought sleep in their own place, and now the sailor joins them, suspended above a rolling deck. The universality strikes you again. No matter where you travel, tavern, cloister, palace, inn, festival, or ship, fatigue humbles everyone. The sea calms further, waves smoothing into a gentle sway. The ship hums softly, timbers creaking like a lullaby. You close your eyes again, imagining what dreams sailors might carry. Perhaps visions of distant ports, or of storms worse than tonight's, or simply of land solid underfoot. You wonder how many never woke, claimed by the sea in their sleep, and the thought chills you. Yet the snores around you insist on endurance. For now, the ship floats, and men and history moves on. Moves. You lie back in the hammock, arms folded across your chest. The motion is steady now, almost pleasant. You breathe slowly, letting the rhythm ease your thoughts. Sleep here is not peaceful, but it is inevitable. You allow yourself to drift, half awake, half adrift, suspended between canvas and sea. Outside, the gulls cry faintly, waves lap against the hull, and stars wheel overhead. Another night passes, rocked into stupor, carried by waters that never sleep. You wake with the sway of the ship still in your bones, though the sound of gulls fades behind you. The sea recedes, replaced by the hush of cloisters once again. Yet this time, the air feels different, not filled with chants or bells, but with murmurs of men gathered to debate what sleep itself means. You step into a hall lined with books, scrolls, and parchment, where the smell of ink and candle wax clings to every corner. A group of scholars huddle together, their heads bent, their voices rising and falling in argument. Tonight you are not among sailors or peasants or revelers. but among doctors and thinkers who seek to explain the very act of closing your eyes. A candle burns low on the table, its light glinting off brass instruments and glass vessels filled with herbs. One scholar waves his hand passionately, declaring that sleep comes from the balance of humors in the body. Mainstream fact. According to Galenic medicine, health depended on 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Sleep, they believed, occurred when the natural heat of the body withdrew inward, allowing digestion to settle the humors. You nod slowly, amused at the certainty in his voice. It sounds convincing, though you suspect he has never tried sleeping in a smoky cottage or aboard a rocking ship. Another scholar interrupts, shaking his head. He insists sleep is governed by the movement of the moon, its phases tugging at the fluids of the body as it does the tides. You glance outside at the silver disk hanging low in the sky, and you cannot help but smirk. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval doctors prescribed sleeping according to lunar cycles, encouraging patients to lie on one side during a waxing moon and the other during a waning. Imagine flipping like a fish every fortnight to keep in balance. You grin faintly, picturing the queen tossing herself across her velvet bed with lunar devotion. Historians still argue whether such beliefs represented genuine attempts at science or were simply elaborate superstition dressed in scholarly robes. You watch the men now, their voices sharp, their faces tired. Each clutches his explanation, as though it might conquer fatigue itself, though their own drooping eyelids betray them. Knowledge does not make the body less weary. It only distracts it with words. The room is filled with manuscripts. Some are beautifully illuminated, others covered in cramped handwriting so dense it makes your eyes ache. You glance at a page filled with drawings of bodies, arrows pointing to organs, captions speculating how sleep drifts through veins and nerves. You touch the parchment gently, the ink dry but rough beneath your fingers. It is impressive, even if uncertain. You sigh softly, realizing how much effort humanity pours into explaining the inevitable. The debate grows louder. One scholar insists sleep is caused by vapors rising from food in the stomach. Another scoffs, arguing it is proof of the soul temporarily leaving the body to commune with higher realms. The first man rolls his eyes, muttering that such theories belong to poets, not doctors. You lean back, listening, amused at the mixture of seriousness and absurdity. If the soul does leave, you think, it must be terribly bored wandering smoky cottages and noisy inns. You glance around the hall, noticing how many scholars themselves look ready to collapse. One rubs his temples, another stifles a yawn, his quill tapping against the table as though trying to stay awake. You remember the monk tying his hair to his stall, the scholar at his desk blotting ink, the sailor clutching his hammock. Even those who claim to understand sleep cannot master it. The irony makes you smile faintly in the dim candlelight. The debate pauses when a young apprentice enters, carrying a jug of watered wine. The scholars sip greedily, hoping for revival. One mutters that rosemary will sharpen his memory. Another requests sage to clear his thoughts. The apprentice nods, hurrying out again, though you doubt herbs can do much against the weight of drooping eyes. You lower yourself onto a bench, listening to the echoes of their conversation. The words begin to blur, phrases repeating, arguments circling. You feel drowsy, as though their endless speculation itself acts like a lullaby. Your mind drifts, imagining each theory as a dream. Humors sloshing, moons tugging, vapors rising, souls wandering. You chuckle softly, shaking your head, knowing none of these answers truly settle the question. Historians still argue about how much medieval people believed these explanations, or whether they repeated them only because tradition demanded it. Perhaps ordinary folk never cared, content to sleep when they could, leaving scholars to tangle themselves in ink and moonlight. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between, belief mixed with pragmatism, ritual blended with resignation. The candles burn lower, wax dripping onto the wooden table in uneven pools. Shadows stretch long across the hall, turning the scholars into specters of themselves. Their voices slow. Yawns slip in between sentences. Arguments falter. Finally, one scholar leans back, his head nodding, his words fading into silence. Another glares at him, ready to scold, before succumbing to the same fate. One by one, they slump against benches, parchments sliding to the floor, quills falling from fingers. The hall of reason collapses into a hall of snores. You smile softly at the sight. So much effort spent explaining sleep, and yet none can resist it. The body wins, always. You rise quietly, stepping toward the door. The parchment rustles under your boots, and the scholars stir faintly, but do not wake. You leave them to their dreams, certain they will argue anew come morning, each convinced his explanation is correct. Outside, the moon glows silver against the black sky. You inhale the cold air, grateful for its clarity after the stifling room. Your steps echo along the stone path, leading you away from doctors of sleep and toward those who live its consequences more directly. Ahead, the street darkens, and you hear the faint clang of a hammer, the shuffle of feet. Workers fight drowsiness with less debate and more punishment, their lives measured not by theory, but by discipline. You draw your cloak tighter, walking toward their weary world. You leave the echoing voices of the doctors behind, stepping into a narrow lane where the rhythm of life feels sharper, harsher. Here, the talk of humors and lunar cycles fades, replaced by the clang of metal and the murmur of workers trying not to nod off. The smell shifts too. Less of ink, more of sweat, iron, and dust. You sense immediately that this world of labor does not treat sleep as a subject of theory, but as a rule of survival. And the punishment for drowsiness can sting harder than any philosopher's scolding. The air is cool, but the workshop you step into burns with heat from the forge. Sparks leap with each hammer strike, glowing orange before vanishing into dark corners. A blacksmith leans heavily against his anvil, sweat streaking his soot-darkened face. His eyelids droop, and for a moment the hammer slips from his grip, clanging loudly against the floor. He startles, mutters, and stoops to grab it again. Mainstream fact. Medieval guilds and tradesmen often faced fines or reprimands if they fell asleep at work. In certain towns, rules were strict. Drowsy apprentices could be beaten, fined, or even dismissed for failing their duties. You watch the blacksmith sigh, adjusting his grip, too aware of the cost of weariness. You glance toward a row of apprentices, their arms straining as they pump the bellows. The motion is repetitive, their eyes glazed. One boy stifles a yawn, then jerks upright when the master snaps his name sharply. You almost feel the sting of the man's glare yourself. Here, fatigue is not a shared joke or gentle indulgence. It is a threat to productivity and safety alike. The heat of the forge demands constant vigilance, and sleep is seen as laziness, not necessity. A mason passes by outside, hauling stones in the dim light of dawn. His pace is slow, shoulders hunched, but he dares not stop. Work crews chant softly to keep rhythm, voices dull, half alive. One man stumbles, nearly dropping his load, and curses himself. You hear him mutter about fines if the foreman catches him slacking. Quirky tidbit. Some records suggest workers even tied cords to their waists and looped them to overhead beams, leaning against the tension so they could rest standing up without collapsing. The image makes you grin faintly, picturing a workshop of dangling figures swaying like puppets, half asleep but still at their tasks. Historians still argue whether such punishments were common practice or exaggerated in chroniclers' accounts meant to dramatize discipline. Some guild charters record harsh fines for negligence, while others suggest more leniency, understanding fatigue as unavoidable. You lean against the wall, uncertain, watching both the fear and the resignation etched into faces. Perhaps the truth is layered, with strict rules on paper, but weary compassion in practice. The day grinds forward. In a weaving hall nearby, women sit at looms, their feet tapping pedals, hands guiding shuttles through threads. The clack of wood fills the room, steady and sharp. One woman blinks slowly, head tilting forward until her shuttle slips. The mistress of the hall scolds her loudly, and the woman straightens, cheeks red, eyes still heavy. You imagine how many mistakes must be hidden in the cloth when eyes glaze too long. Yet the fabric keeps growing, line by line, even if woven through fatigue. You step outside again, the sun barely climbing, and find yourself at a construction site where laborers haul timbers into place. The air smells of sawdust and sweat. A man leans against a beam, yawning, only to be struck lightly on the shoulder by the overseer's stick. Not cruel, but sharp enough to wake him. The man mutters an apology, though his shoulders sag with exhaustion. You sigh, recognizing the pattern. Punishment not always brutal, but always looming. A shadow cast across every yawn. A bell rings faintly in the distance, calling workers to change shifts. You watch as a group trudges past, their eyes dull, their pace sluggish. One stumbles, nearly falling, then steadies himself. You think of monks rising from midnight prayers, sailors climbing into hammocks, peasants coughing in smoky air. Each carried their fatigue differently, but here it is more visible, etched into bodies bent by labor, dulled by rules, disciplined into wakefulness. You pause at a tavern corner where a group of apprentices huddle, whispering jokes despite their weariness. One teases another, claiming he once fell asleep at the loom and woke to find his hair woven into the fabric. The others laugh, though quietly, as if laughter itself might draw reprimand. You smile at the image, half ridiculous, half believable. Fatigue has no mercy, and the human body finds ways to mock discipline. The afternoon drags, the sun rises higher, yet the streets look no brighter. Work continues in endless rhythm. Hammer, shuttle, saw, chant. You feel your own limbs heavy, as though absorbing their exhaustion. You close your eyes for a moment, leaning against the wall, only to startle when a cart rattles past. The driver glares at you suspiciously, as though resting too long is itself a crime. You chuckle softly, reminded that even bystanders cannot look too idle in a world that punishes drowsiness. Historians still debate whether workers truly faced constant strictness, or whether anecdotes exaggerate the severity. Perhaps the truth lies in moments like these, fear of punishment sharper than punishment itself, keeping people upright long after their bodies begged for rest. You rub your eyes, imagining how many fell asleep secretly, heads bowed as though in prayer, hoping to escape notice. The day wanes, shadows lengthen, and workers file away. Some limp, some yawn. Some laugh faintly in relief. You watch them vanish into alleys, heading home to straw pallets and smoky fires. Their punishments are behind them, but fatigue lingers still, heavy and constant. You stretch your arms, exhaling slowly. Ahead, you sense new sounds, the clang of bells, the thrum of machines, the stir of a world moving into new rhythms. Beyond workshops and guild halls waits the modern age, where shifts are marked by clocks and fatigue becomes industrial. You step toward it, leaving punishments behind, ready to enter the world of factory bells and weary footsteps. You step forward from the world of guild halls and workshops into streets that hum with a different rhythm. The air smells sharper, less of wood smoke and damp hay, more of coal and iron. The road ahead rattles with cartwheels, but beyond them you hear a deeper sound. Steady, metallic, merciless. The clang of bells rises above rooftops, louder than any church chime, and you realize you have crossed into the age of industry. Here, sleep bends not to monks or masters, but to machines. Smoke billows from tall chimneys, staining the sky a permanent gray. Windows glow faintly in long brick buildings, rows of them stretching farther than the eye can follow. You walk inside one, the air immediately thick with heat and soot. A whistle shrieks overhead, so sharp you flinch. Men and women move in lines, their faces blank, their eyes shadowed. The factory is alive with noise, gears grinding, wheels turning, belts slapping, steam hissing. Yet beneath the sound is another rhythm, quieter but constant. The yawns, the sagging shoulders, the suppressed sighs of bodies fighting fatigue. Mainstream fact: by the late 18th and 19th centuries, industrialization imposed strict shifts, often 12 to 16 hours long. Factory bells replaced natural rhythms of day and night, commanding when workers rose, ate, and slept. You feel the harshness immediately, as though every tick of the machine steals another moment of rest. Unlike peasants who followed sun and season, these workers are chained to clocks, and the chains rattle with every clang. You glance at a young boy tending a loom, his small hands darting among threads. His eyelids droop, his head tilts, and suddenly the shuttle slams against his knuckles. He cries out, clutching his hand. The overseer barks at him. Not unkindly, but firmly, urging him back to work. You wince, heart tight, reminded of apprentices punished in guild halls. Quirky detail: some factories kept buckets of cold water ready to splash in the faces of children who nodded off, claiming it kept them safe. You imagine the shock, the sputtering, and cannot decide if it is more cruel or comical. Historians still argue whether early industrial workers truly suffered constant exhaustion, or whether reformers exaggerated conditions to spur change. Reports describe both. Relentless shifts, yes, but also periods of camaraderie, shared meals, and stolen naps. You look around now, seeing both truths. A woman hums softly as she works, her voice soothing the rhythm of the loom. Yet beside her, a man slumps forward, jolting awake each time his head dips too low. The factory is both cage and community, punishing and protective. You step further inside, feeling the vibration of machines through the floorboards. The air grows hotter, steam rising in clouds. Workers wipe sweat with sooty rags, their hair plastered to their foreheads. The noise is relentless, a hammer pounding your skull. You wonder how anyone could sleep after hours here, their ears still ringing, their muscles twitching from constant strain. You think of the monks' bells, regular but brief, and realize how different these bells are. Less holy, more demanding, yet just as inescapable. A whistle shrieks again. Workers pause, shoulders sagging, rubbing their eyes. It is not rest exactly, only a break. They sit on benches, gulping bread and weak tea, some leaning their heads against walls. One boy curls his arms on his knees, falling asleep instantly, despite the noise. His friend nudges him awake when the whistle sounds again, and he stumbles back to the loom, eyes still closed. You sigh softly, feeling the ache of his fatigue, as though it were your own. You step outside into the yard, where smoke curls into the sky. Workers file past, some laughing faintly, others silent. A man jokes about dreaming of looms that keep weaving even without him. Another mutters that his dreams are only of bells ringing, over and over. You smile faintly, amused and saddened. Even in dreams, machines intrude. The streets beyond buzz with the same rhythm. Row houses line the lanes, their chimneys coughing smoke. Curtains flutter faintly, revealing faces pale with fatigue. Inside, entire families collapse onto narrow beds, often several to a mattress. Privacy vanishes, replaced by necessity. You peer into one window where a father snores loudly, his children curled around him like kittens. The mother stirs faintly, rising to tend a crying baby, her eyes red. Sleep here is communal, but fractured by duty and noise. Quirky detail returns when you overhear a woman say she keeps a jar of vinegar by her bed. Each morning, she dips a cloth and presses it to her face to wake faster. You laugh softly, though the thought of vinegar stinging your nose feels like its own punishment. Others swear by strong tea, though its bitterness hardly soothes. Remedies change, yet the problem persists. Too little sleep, too many hours. Historians still argue whether industrialization permanently changed human sleep or simply shifted its boundaries. Some claim segmented sleep persisted well into this era, while others insist factory bells forced continuous blocks, regardless of natural rhythm. You stand in the street, uncertain, sensing how both patterns overlap. Perhaps a worker dozes in short bursts, then collapses deeply when possible. Perhaps sleep itself adapts, bending to machines as it once bent to monks and roosters. The bells toll again, loud enough to rattle windows. Workers groan, rise, shuffle toward the factory once more. The sound dominates the city, echoing through alleys, commanding even those not employed to notice. You cover your ears, but the clang seeps into your bones. It is not music, not prayer, not celebration. It is pure command, the sound of rest ending whether you are ready or not. You walk further, reaching a railway yard. Engines hiss, sparks fly. Whistles shriek. Workers slump on benches between shifts. Some sprawled on the ground, cloaks wrapped tightly against the chill. A man snores loudly beside the tracks, unbothered by the noise. Another eats slowly, eyes half shut, his bread dropping from his hand as he drifts. You realize now that sleep in the industrial world no longer belongs to the sleeper. It belongs to the bell, the whistle, the machine. The night deepens. Smoke dims the stars. Lamps glow faintly along the street, casting pale circles where workers stumble home. You follow them, hearing their murmurs, their yawns, their laughter edged with weariness. A child tugs at his father's sleeve, begging for a story before bed, though the father's eyes close as he speaks. The child giggles, finishing the tale himself while his father snores. You smile softly, touched by the resilience, even in fatigue. You stop at a crossroads, glancing back at chimneys still coughing smoke. Somewhere a bell clangs again, though softer now. Ahead, the world shifts once more. Revolutions brew, barricades rise, ballrooms glitter, and people still fall asleep through it all. History accelerates, yet sleep clings stubbornly, unshaken by politics. You pull your cloak tighter, stepping toward that world, ready to witness dreams surviving even amid revolutions. You walk from the smokestacks and factory bells into streets where tension hums like a restless drum. The air is different here, not only thick with coal dust, but also charged with voices raised in chants, the scrape of boots, the clang of barricades built hastily from barrels and stones. Revolutions stir, and yet, in the middle of them, people still sleep. You stand at the edge of a square where a bonfire burns low, rebels slumped around it, their muskets propped like weary companions. One man snores loudly with his boots still on. Another dreams fitfully, muttering about liberty as though speeches have followed him into his rest. Mainstream fact. During the French Revolution, Paris itself rarely slept. The city alive with meetings, rallies, and violence. Yet even amid barricades, fatigue overtook everyone. Guards collapsed on cobblestones, leaders nodded off in carriages, and pamphleteers dozed between printings. Sleep intruded, even where history demanded wakefulness. You glance at a woman clutching her child on the steps of a church. She rocks slowly, eyelids closing, though the crowd around her still argues fiercely. Quirky tidbit emerges from whispered stories. Some revolutionaries claimed to dream of symbols, roosters crowing, suns rising, oceans breaking chains, and woke, convinced these visions proved their cause righteous. A man nearby mumbles in his sleep, fists clenched, as though grasping at invisible banners. You smile faintly, wondering how many speeches began not in daylight, but in half-remembered dreams. Historians still argue whether sleep during revolutions revealed resilience or weakness. Were weary soldiers at barricades proof of human frailty or evidence of determination, sleeping in shifts to preserve strength? The answer drifts like smoke, unresolved. You walk on, stepping into a ballroom lit with chandeliers, where another kind of sleeplessness reigns. Nobles whirl in late dances, their gowns sweeping the floor, while servants stifle yawns behind trays. Laughter fills the hall, yet behind jeweled masks you notice glazed eyes. Even amid glitter, fatigue whispers. A duke sways too far, nearly tumbling mid-step. His partner giggles, covering the stumble as a flourish, though you see the truth. He is more exhausted than graceful. Musicians yawn between notes, fiddles drooping, trumpeters nodding before jolting awake with blasts. You think of peasants on smoky pallets, sailors in hammocks, scholars at desks. The gowns here shine brighter, but the drowsiness is the same. Sleep equalizes, ignoring crowns and chains alike. The night stretches into dawn. Outside the ballroom, revolutionaries march, boots striking stone, voices raised. Inside, dancers still twirl, determined to deny exhaustion. Both scenes collide at the edge of morning, proof that history never pauses for rest. You step away, breath steady, realizing that whether on barricades or in ballrooms, humanity dreams and dozes, even as the world tilts. Sleep may not stop revolutions, but it shadows them, softening their edges, reminding you that even in chaos, The body demands surrender. You keep walking, the noise of bells and slogans fading. The sky pales, morning inching forward. Your own eyelids feel heavy, thoughts softer, words blending. The brewer leaning on his vat, the monk swaying in choir, the peasant beneath smoke, the queen among feathers, the scholar blotting ink, the merchant snoring on grain, the reveler by fire, the sailor rocking at sea, all echo in your memory. Now the rebel in the square, the noble in the ballroom, join them in the same unbroken line. History may roar, but sleep whispers always, in every century, in every bed, in every weary breath. You exhale slowly, stepping into quiet, ready to let the noise fade into dreams. The journey softens now, the noise of factories and revolutions dissolving into a gentler rhythm. You feel the weight of history recede, like waves pulling back from a shore, leaving only the hush of sand and the faint echo of water. Your breath slows, your shoulders loosen, and each detail of the past grows lighter, blurred like ink washed in rain. You picture the brewer's sleepy smile, the monk's tethered head, the peasant curling under wool, the queen sighing among lavender, the scholar slumped over parchment, the sailor rocked in his hammock, the worker punished for dozing, the revolutionary snoring at the barricade. Each of them, despite noise or duty, surrendered to the same quiet. Their dreams vanished, but the rhythm of their rest lingers, carrying you with it. The air grows warmer, softer, each sound lengthened until it dissolves. Candles gutter low, bells fall silent, fires fade into embers. You drift further, guided not by machines or revolutions, but by the simple tide of your own breath. The story is ending, but its calm remains, wrapping you gently. So let your eyes close, let your body sink, let the world recede. History will wait until morning. For now, you are safe, you are still, and you are carried gently into sleep.